And now for something completely different. As a departure from the track we'd been using, I picked out a new track for this technique. This is the 1176 parallel kick and snare bus, as described by Rich Costey and as used by him on the first Audioslave album. He learned this from Jim Scott, another of Rick Rubin's favorite engineers, amongst the engineers who used it on Tom Petty's Wildflowers album in the 90s. In fact, if you listen to the Steve Ferrone's drums on You Don't Know How It Feels, that is a great example of his technique. You'll recognize it right away. Jim Scott learned it from engineering legend Shelly Yakus, who supposedly used it on Tom Petty's Damn the Torpedoes album in '79, I think that was. So there's a whole lineage of engineers who have used this technique. Rick Rubin's productions, he's a big fan of it. So a lot of guys who are mixing for Rick know that he really likes what this does to kick and snares. So before I do any more yapping, here, let me play a little. That's it by itself. I'm using this Blue Stripe 1176. We'll get into the settings in a minute. I'm building my mix pre-fade, and I have it on these faders so you can see that. Reason being is that I didn't want to send as much kick drum to it as I'm sending to the regular drum mix. I want the snare to be the most dominant thing hitting the 1176. Here's what happens if it's the kick. See all that extra low frequency energy, and now the snare is slightly dwarfed. So I like to pull back the kick and let the snare sort of get its glory with this technique. I've also got an EQP 1A plugin after the 1176 on this bus, and this is also part of the chain as described by Rich Costey. I'm using this to bring back some of the low end we're missing. That way the kick isn't pushing the compressor, but you're not actually losing any low end presence. And then also boosting some 3K, which really puts the snare that much more forward in the mix. And here's the drums without it. Not bad. They just come alive when you open up that fader. Again, without, with. So, I'm using a little bit of the room mics that came with this kit, but not too much. I am using the Sound City plugin. But here, if I take out the Sound City room, so yeah, I really like that one a lot. So here's what I want to get into with this. I calibrated all of these different compressors because I wanted to show you what this could sound like with other things. The 1176 Rev A, the Blue Stripe version, is my favorite. Rich Costey described doing this by pressing in the 4-to-1 and 12-to-1 buttons together. Now, you can't do exactly that on any of these plugins, but Universal Audio swears that it's the outer buttons that make the difference. So the fact that you have to do it 4, 8, and 12 on here should be ideally the same as what Rich does with 4 and 12. I don't have an original unit to test it on. It's been quite a while since I played with a real one, so I cannot confirm or deny that. I'm just going with what Universal Audio says is kosher in this case. So the other important things are slowest attack. As you know, the 1176 knobs are backwards from every other compressor known to man. So 1 is actually the slowest attack. 7 would be the fastest, and we're on the fastest release, the 7. Now, in terms of the input and output, output you're gonna suit the taste. I am kind of really slamming that fader pretty hard. Input, what I did here was I calibrated all of these tracks with a signal generator. I'm not going to turn it on now because nobody needs 1K blasted in their ears, nor do I while I'm doing this. So I calibrated each one of these compressors to give exactly 7 dB of gain reduction and an output of -14. So that's where the input levels are calibrated on every compressor here. As you see it, we go to the blackface, the input level's higher. Why is that? Because this one has more gain. The blue stripe has more gain. So we didn't have to push it as high, but you go to the Rev E, the blackface, and you have to push it about 5 dB hotter. So I set this to give the same exact level of gain reduction and output as the blue stripe. I did the same with the anniversary edition, which again is, since the ratio doesn't have a 12-to-1 ratio, so I actually did 2, 4, and 8 on this. We'll go through the differences. I also used the Bomb Factory stuff, which the meter ballistics are a little wonky on both of these, but they still sound pretty good. And with these, you can only do all 4 buttons. You can't do just the 3, which is limiting, but they're still pretty good compressors. And then, just for fun, I did it with a distressor on Nuke. So let's start going through them and listening to them, because it's one of my favorite things here. So this is my favorite. Little bypass. That's the drums without it. So that's our drum mix that we've made on these pre-fader aux sends. Okay. Now, here's the blackface, revision E. Really similar. If I bypass that, I think this is still a little more aggressive, even with the settings calibrated. And then the anniversary edition still has a nice punch to it, but I do think that's probably the most gentle of these UA options. But it's not that far off. I think just a little less of the background is brought up, which makes sense since the ratio wouldn't be as high. Now let's go to the Bomb Factory. The Bomb Factory really exaggerates this. I like these. I've been using these compressors for 25 years. I still think they're really relevant and really cool sounding. But they do the all 4 button thing. Just 20 is not bad. Yeah, they really blow it up in terms of maybe overemphasizing the effect. And the purple is similar. The ballistics are really weird on this one. I used to own a purple, and I actually wasn't really crazy about this on the real unit. I just didn't think it did the all buttons in as good as the real 1176. Although it's still a great compressor in its own right. Might actually be preferred for some other things. And here's the distressor. Again, kind of has its own thing going on compared to the 1176s. But does a cool thing to the snare. Ah, there it is. Nothing quite like that blue stripe. See, in the context of the mix, you could hear the aggressiveness of the blue stripe is a lot stronger than this blackface version. The snare really pops out a little more with this one. Now we're on the anniversary edition. Not bad at all. And if all you have is a Bomb Factory, you can still do some cool stuff. Yeah. Blue stripe's still gonna be my favorite, I think. So yeah, very cool, useful thing to have in your mixing arsenal, courtesy of Rich Costey, Jim Scott, Shelly Yakus, and now you know it too.